Before we discuss the church as a driver in deconstruction, and I share about its significance in my personal journey, I want to clarify a few things. If you follow me closely, and thankfully not many people do, you know I already filmed and posted a video to my YouTube channel addressing the church as a driver in deconstruction. I did take that down yesterday. Initially when I rewatched it, I wasn't super comfortable with it, but I couldn't pinpoint a reason why. Yesterday morning, as I'm gearing up to talk about the church as a driver in deconstruction in a more expansive way over the next week, I watched it again, and I think I realized what the issue was, so I took it down and I'll be refilming it. But I think the problem was that in that video, to me it seems like I am addressing evangelical and fundamentalist Christian circles. And quite simply, quite bluntly, those are not the people I am called to reach. I have a lot going on, a lot of different priorities, a lot of competing priorities. I work full time. I'm an artist, so I have a studio that I'm running with that. And then I am leading this deconstructed project, which involves writing proposals and business plans and all of that good stuff, along with being present and discussing the things that lead into that, with the goal of having a broadly and deeply relatable story to tell, or stories to tell really, in that series. And so I don't have the capacity to address people who I'm not called to reach. That's not to say that if you're evangelical or a fundamentalist Christian that we can't have a dialogue, but this is not being created for you. And I've noticed that a lot of what I'm doing is saying things. You'll ask a question on some of the content, or you'll say something on some of the content, and I'll be saying the same things that I've been saying for years and that are very public, and that if you would just listen to what I'm saying, you would have them. So I'm spending a lot of time catching you up when the resources are already there, the things are already there for you to look at. So rather than addressing you, you may find, if you are evangelical or fundamentalist or in those circles, you may find me pointing you to the things that I've already said, like, hey, I've already addressed this in this place. You're welcome to look at it at your own discretion, because saying things that I've already said and said very clearly is not my priority right now. And the reason for this is just that for the past 2 years or so, God has made it clear that I am setting a table, and that I'm inviting people to that table, and that there are one of the most painful lessons that I think I've learned in the past 2 years is that there are people who just don't want to be at the table, and I have to be okay with that. So I'm going to read the passage that is shaping what I'm doing, who I'm called to reach for you right now. It's in Luke 14. And I'm going to go ahead and read the full chapter for context, because I think it's all important. So this is Luke 14. I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible. So here we go. It happened that when Jesus went into the house of one of the leaders of the Pharisees on the Sabbath to eat bread, they were watching him closely. And there in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. And Jesus answered and spoke to the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they kept silent. And he took hold of the man and healed him and sent him away. And he said to them, which one of you will have a son or an ox fall into a well and will not immediately pull him out on a Sabbath day? And they could make no reply to this. And he began speaking a parable to the invited guests when he noticed how they had been picking out the places of honor at the table, saying to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for someone even more distinguished than you may have been invited by him. And he who invited you both will come to you and say, give your place to this man, and then in disgrace you will proceed to occupy the last place. But when you are invited, go and recline at the last place, so that when the one who has invited you comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will have honor in the sight of all who are at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And he also went on to say to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, or your brothers, or your relatives, or your rich neighbors. Otherwise, they may also invite you in return, and that will be your repayment. But when you give a reception, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, since they do not have the means to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. When one of those who were reclining at the table with him heard this, he said to him, blessed is everyone who will eat in the kingdom of God. But Jesus said to him, a man was giving a big dinner, and he invited many. And at the dinner hour, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, come, for everything is ready now. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said to him, I have bought a piece of land, and I need to go out and look at it. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I have bought 5 yokes of oxen, and I am going to try them out. Please consider me excused. Another one said, I have married a wife, and for that reason I cannot come. And the slave came back and reported this to his master. Then the head of the household became angry and said to his slave, go out at once into the streets and the lanes of the city and bring them in here, the poor and crippled and blind and lame. And the slave said, Master, what you've commanded has been done, and there is still room. And the master said to the slave, go out into the highways and along the hedges and compel them to come in, so that my house may be full. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste of my dinner. Now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which one of you, when he wants to build his tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who observe it begin to ridicule him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So then, none of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. Therefore, salt is good, but if even salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for soil or for the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So like I said, this has been the past 2 years that I have been rooted and grounded, and I've been through in this passage, rooted and grounded in this passage, and I've been through the rejection phase. I know who's not coming. I know who has no intention of hearing anything I have to say. I am not concerned about it. I'm concerned about those people who are in the highways and the byways and the lanes of the city, the lame, the poor, the blind. Those are the people who I'm trying to reach. I'm not trying to reach the religious, be they evangelical or fundamentalist or even progressive Christians. Those are not my circles. And so as I've been considering this, I've particularly in the past month or so, as I've been considering like the production studios, social media strategy and all of that, I'm like, what does that look like on social media? How do I reach the people I'm trying to reach on social media? And conventional wisdom tells me that I should be, posting a certain time of day. I love Sprout Social. They have like these color maps of when there's traffic on each of the social media platforms. And so it's really cool. You can see when the people are there. And conventional wisdom says you want to be there when everybody else is there. But then I got thinking about this passage and I'm like, does that apply here? And then I thought about John 4, and I'm just going to read, this is the story of the woman at the well, if you don't know. And I'm just going to read the first couple of verses of John 4. You can read the rest of the story on your own time. If you don't own a Bible, I love the internet because all you have to do is like Google John 4, Bible Gateway, and it'll pull it up. You can read it in any version you want. I really like the NASB right now. The NIV is a good version that I've used in the past. I'm not going to go into translations and all of that, but if you want something that's easy to read, I would recommend the NIV or the NASB for sure. But I'm going to read the first 7 verses of John 4. And again, go back and read the whole thing. It's a great story. Therefore, when the Lord knew the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went away again into Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph, and Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. So my Bible has a little footnote, and it says it was probably either 6 p.m. Roman time or noon Jewish time. And verse 7 says, there came a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. Okay, so women, from what I understand, scholars say women of that time would have gone together in a group at a certain time of day, like usually early morning, to draw their water for the day, like before it was too hot and all of that. And they went together. It was a communal thing. But at the time Jesus was there was one woman. And it said, it says in this verse, and I think it was really interesting because it said he had to pass through Samaria. And again, I've heard scholars say that would be actually easier for him or more traditional for him to bypass Samaria altogether, just because of how the Jews and the Samaritans did not get along at the time. So he has to go through Samaria. He comes to this well at a time when literally nobody should be there, but there's one person there. So I'm thinking, like, how does this apply to my social media strategy? So I tell you, Sprout Social has these color maps, and when it's like the really heavy color, that's when everybody's on, and when it's like the lighter colors, it's when not as many people are on. So you'll notice that personally over the past couple of weeks, I've begun on my personal page and anything to do with the studio, I'm actually posting at night. My artist page is still in the morning, but again, that's when that audience is on. But in terms of this is when the people I'm trying to reach are on. And so, because if you think about it, it makes sense. Like, it's going to be those nighttime hours where, like the loneliness, the marginalization, all of that hits you kind of the hardest. And that's when you're on. That's when you're looking for something. And so that's when I've got to be there. So you'll notice that I have switched that up, and I've switched it up for that reason. But it all goes back to that for me. It all goes back to who I'm trying to reach. And that's why I've got to refilm a video about the church and its role in deconstruction and its significance in my personal journey, because the way I addressed it the first time was not with who I'm trying to reach in mind. And everything, all of my priorities have to be centered around that. My full-time job actually plays a very significant role in what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to learn. It's going to make me a better producer, I promise you, or I wouldn't be doing it. And so I've got to show up there, and I've got to learn what I can there. But then in my art studio, that from a financial perspective, that supports what I want to do with Deconstructed. I mean, I love creating, but everything that I'm doing is centered around this idea of going into the highways and byways and bringing people in. And we know that a seat at the table is not necessarily discipleship, right? That's in Luke 14 right there too. That's a different level, and certainly that's something that I have to consider as well. But that my role is to bring people in, and it is the Holy Spirit's role to disciple them and to bring them where He wants them to be, and to get them to the place of surrender to Him. But that there is a significant amount of detangling that has to happen there first, and that is what I get to be a part of. But my role is not to convert the fundamentalists or the evangelicals. Like, believe me, I never really had a seat at the fundamentalist table, being a woman. Like, we're to be seen and not heard. But certainly when I was fairly what the evangelicals would call doctrinally sound, I did have a place at that table, right? As long as I was conforming to what was commonly held, I was in good standing and I had a seat at the table there. But the problem is that my integrity does not allow me to say that I believe things that I don't anymore. And I don't know that it ever did. Like, I think I sincerely believed things in as much as I understood them, and now, in as much as I understand them, I believe very different things now. And so my goal is not to reach these people. Again, I can have conversations with them. That's exactly what Luke 14 is all about. And even when he tells the parable of the marriage feast in Matthew 22, contextually, he's talking to Pharisees and religious leaders of the day as well. So it's not that these conversations can't be had. It's that that's not my primary audience. That's not my priority right now. So yeah. But I did want to clarify that before I go into, and clarify it for me as much as for you, that I'm here for the ones that the evangelical church and the fundamentalist church have really wounded, have wounded to the point where they don't even know if they want to have a relationship with God. That's serious stuff, and that's not on that's on the shoulders of those circles. But my goal is to be here and to be present and to be a light in that space, and so that's what I'm going to do.